Welcome to the Powerful Introvert Podcast. I'm Greg Weinger. I'm here today with, and keep me honest here, Holly Golebiowski.
Perfect. That was right.
Yes, nailed it. As we just said, my name has been butchered almost my entire life. Weinger, Wininger. If you could think it, I've probably heard it. So I'm sure you've experienced some of the same.
Absolutely. That's why a lot of people just call me Holly G. It's much easier to say and easier to remember.
All right, so I may be calling you that during this podcast as well. Um, but I'm super excited to have you on the podcast today because you're a really deep expert in leadership and leadership training.
Yes, I'm delighted to be here. And I'm very excited when I found out about the podcast and introverts. I feel like it's a very under-recognized group of people who I think are very much often overlooked. So I'm excited to be here and talk about it and talk with you today.
Awesome. Well, let's get into it. So maybe we can start out with an easy one. It's on your shirt here. Could you tell us a little bit about what you do and your company Leader Skills?
Yeah, absolutely. Skills, pretty much, we call it no bullshit leadership training. I hope I'm allowed to swear on your podcast.
Absolutely, as much as you need to.
All right, wonderful. It is really the evolution of it is probably the best way to explain it. I early in my career struggled heavily when I made the jump from on-site manager to a regional manager, and ended up going to my boss asking for help. And the coach that they found for me to help me is Nan O'Connor, the creator of the content, the whole platform, Leader Skills. And pretty much it is everything that she taught me back then that completely changed my career. I call myself student zero because we spent about 6 months going through a lot of different topics and tools and things from handling conflict to having self-awareness, and she took that and pretty much created courses out of it for people to learn to be better leaders. And I can't take full credit. She actually looked back at a lot of people that C-suite executives she's worked with over the years, and just said what made them great leaders, and looked at over the course of her career, which now she's been doing it for 27, really developed the program and curriculum based off of people she saw being very effective and how they did it well. So it is pretty much an online training course that you can take, but it's also hybrid. There are sessions that I or other facilitators will lead with the groups going through it. It takes about 30 minutes of time every 2 weeks to do the curriculum, and then you have 2 weeks to practice it. So it's, I think, very unique in that you can start doing right away within minutes of learning this information, and then you're actually learning on the job. So it's pretty awesome, and I'm very happy to be a part of it and really enjoy it.
That's great. You must have. There's a special depth that you get if you're there in the beginning and part of helping to develop the materials, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. It's been very rewarding. And it was very serendipitous how I got involved. I'm humbled a bit that someone like Nan, that I've looked up to very much and has a lot to offer leaders, I think, asked me to get involved with her a few years into it. So yeah, it's been pretty awesome.
Yeah. So, and that became your path, but I think a lot of people have been in those same shoes where you're encountering struggles in your job, you're earlier on in your career, and there's a point where you realize that you need some help. So what are some of the most, from what you've seen, the most common challenges aspiring leaders encounter?
Ooh. Well, there's probably two. First of all, assumptions in the workplace, I think, are a complete enemy, but we do it all the time. We make assumptions based on what others are doing or how they react, based on our own internal dialogue or how we would do it or why we would act that way. And I think that is a huge error that a lot of us make, because conflict and facing conflict is the second problem. And conflict comes from unspoken and unmet expectations. And when we make a lot of assumptions, we're creating our own conflict. It's very interesting how those two can interact together. So I would say those are two things that have a lot to do with a lot of problems and confrontations or people being unhappy, those two things.
That's right. And a lot of times I've seen You have people from two different departments, and their their incentives or what they're supposed to be doing are misaligned, and so I guess
Absolutely.
it's surfacing those things in your framework, which helps with.
Absolutely.
Are there any particular challenges that you see in that for introverts?
Well, that's a very open-ended question. I could probably just keep talking for quite a while, but I would say the first and most important thing with introverts is that typically, so let me tell you something that Nan shared with me, and that stuck with me, and I think is really interesting, is that in the workplace and over all the years she's been a coach, the majority of the CEOs she's worked with have been extroverts,
Hmm.
but some of the very best were introverts. So I think a woman who not only has been an executive coach, certified mastered with ICF, like she's very probably coached more C-suite people than most coaches coaching today. I mean, over the course of her career, she's just it's not only been doing that a long time, but also owned her own advertising company. She had clients like Coca-Cola. Like it was no mom and pop shop. Like it was a big deal. So for her to say something like that in her own experience, I think speaks a lot to the skills and abilities that introverts have that people often overlook because they are not the loudest people in the room. That's probably going to be what I refer back to a lot as we talk today, just how undervalued and unheard they are in the room.
That's yeah, I totally agree with that message. It's something that I think people need to see, and maybe I like to say they're often hiding in plain sight. Introverted leaders aren't calling attention to themselves, but they're there. And if
Mhm,
you watch for them, it's really interesting to see how they kind of exert their influence and power,
mhm,
because it's a different style. It's a different leadership style, and that's great to hear
absolutely.
that that's someone as experienced as your mentor has seen a lot of that.
Absolutely.
I imagine that we were talking about what are these common challenges, and one of the things that I've seen or encountered or just experienced myself is that is in dealing with conflict. And so I think, just to generalize a little bit with people who are on the introverted side, there is more hesitation to conflict. So are there some additional strategies for as you settle in and kind of deal with conflict?
Yeah, I think that so something that I think I'm very involved with. There's something we do at Leader Skills is we make everyone take the DISC profile.
Hmm.
It's not a personality assessment. It's been around for a very long time. And even in my own experience, I very rarely have people after I've worked with them long term say, that isn't me. It's even the people that say that isn't me within a few months, they're like, or even a few days, they're like, oh crap, that is me. But there's no right or wrong disc. And I'm going to, since, a lot of your listeners may not be familiar with it, I'm going to try to put it into like broader terms. But the majority of people that take the disc, there's four different types: dominant, influence, steadiness, and compliance. And so typically, two-thirds of people are on the S or C range, which means steadiness and compliance. And that just means that people are solving the problems when they're high C really by looking to the rules, the structure around them, because they want to make sure they're doing things the right way and looking to those resources. Steadiness, usually they solve problems by not, they don't want the boat to be rocked. They want to keep everybody kind of even keel, everybody getting along. And traditionally, those S's and C's are introverts, not
Hmm.
always, but traditionally. And two-thirds of the world fall into that SC spot. That means the majority of the people you work with are probably introverts. But what's funny is most people don't see or hear the introverts because they do tend to be quiet, right? Even though they're the majority, it's the more dominant, more like outgoing people who use like their people skills to influence people, or they're just more aggressive. That doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, but just more aggressive in how they approach people, more dominant. So you have these outgoing, dominant people who everybody sees and hears because they're the loudest. They speak up the most often. They're not afraid of failure as much because they are just going to, probably throw spaghetti at the wall to a degree. Whereas I think people that fall into that introvert category think more deeply about things. They take more time to consider all the avenues, all the areas of a problem or a situation because their mouth is shut more often. They're taking that time. They're listening. And I think the reality is the loud people who are often leaders are not doing that. And I'm guilty of this myself. I am the high D, high I. I am the person in the room that's talking too much and too loud. And it's interesting because with leader skills, it really did make me self-aware. It put that mirror in front of my face and made me realize, oh my gosh, I haven't seen or heard the people in the room that probably are my best asset. So what I would say is that if you are an introvert, there's people like me in the room that are just oblivious, completely oblivious to the fact that we're not hearing or seeing you because we're used to the loudest in the room and paying attention to them. It's, I think, important to remember that the people like me out there don't not care. We don't want to not hear you and we don't want to not listen. It's gone over our head. And I can tell you, I'm fully guilty of not reading between the lines. I don't know how many times people have said, "Well, you should know." And I'm like, "What should I know? I don't know what I should know." And they're like, "Well, I mean, I've implied or I've, dropped hints or just different things that were not direct communication." So what I would say is that I had someone after I started working with Nan that really kind of put themselves in front of me. They were an introvert and became my partner in crime, in effect. And it was because Nan said, "Stop, listen, and hear what he has to say, and stop leading the witness. Stop having leading questions because he's never going to give you your opinion if he already thinks you've made your mind up." So I just think it's important if you are an introvert to make sure you take a moment to be your own advocate. And really, it doesn't have to be in the middle of the meeting or in the middle of a group of people, but take time to go to maybe your boss or people that you're interacting with that maybe are stepping on your toes or steamrolling you. Just say, "Hey, I just want you to know I had a few thoughts about this. I wanted to share it." And be very honest. You can say, "I am an introvert." And that makes a big difference with people like me because it makes us stop and think for a minute. Hey, wait, okay, you're an introvert. I've never considered that before. And now you're
Hmm.
telling me, "Hey, Holly, I feel steamrolled," which when I was first told that, I was blown away and felt horrible because that was not my
Hmm.
intent, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
not what I meant to do. Or say, I don't feel like I'm being heard, or you're not listening. Those are things that we very much have no clue. We do not realize. And I think that's important to remember. We have no intention to overlook you or not hear you.
I really appreciate that perspective. I think that's a really great thing for people to hear because it's a real reminder to have some empathy because it's there's I think there is a natural tendency. I've had this plenty of times. I've definitely been guilty of it of taking that personally, and so
Mhm.
like whenever possible, can to assume good intent and to let the person know and understand their. I guess that's part of what the disc profile is about because it's like understand that that's just their style and they're going to keep thinking aloud and that's fine. That's the extrovert mode and the introvert mode. It's frankly hard to think when someone's talking the whole time because you're focused on trying to processing everything that the extrovert is
Yeah,
saying and then you feel like you're not contributing because you're not doing your best thinking that so it's great to create those opportunities for communication.
absolutely. And really you can even in your own situation come up with ways to almost have a buzzword to kind of put the extroverts in the room on notice. After I became more self-aware, and my company I worked for at the time ended up hiring Nan, and they insisted she develop leader skills without knowing that's what it was at the time, and she ended up rolling the program out to them, thinking it was only for them. And it did really well. So we all kind of evolved together as a company with all these principles. And one thing we started saying was, "Hold on, let Lori blend," because we knew that this great woman who was a very good leader in the room didn't speak up much, but she needed time to blend on what was being spoken about. And so she'd just say, "Guys, I need time to blend. Give me a minute." And that actually made a very big difference, because then we realized it wasn't that she didn't want to say anything. It wasn't that she wasn't listening. It wasn't that she had nothing to offer. We just needed to give her more time in the room. So that became very helpful, I think, for a lot of us.
I like that. I actually haven't heard that that idea before. Just or like the safe word for introverts
Yeah,
in a way.
that's a great thing to call it, the safe word. I like that.
Those are the kinds of things that I on the lookout for. what are norms or structures that can help create a more inclusive room for dialogue. And so one of the ideas I've talked about or heard about is preparation for meetings. So like, you have an idea. I mean, thinking aloud and talking aloud in a room is fantastic for extroverts, and then because that's when they do their best thinking, and the opposite for introverts. So if you give them time, they can come prepared, and then you kind of have a more even playing field. And actually, I think it can help the extroverts too to have that time to prepare as well.
Oh, yes, we really could value from that. Like that would be huge if we would do that.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah. Any other? I mean, not to put you on the spot with this one. Are there any other ideas or kind of uh, approaches that a company can take to try to foster this kind of dialogue?
Well, I think that very few companies train leaders on being leaders. They train people on how to do, how to have like this is how to do all the tasks of your job. So I do not think every company needs to spend a ton of money and go hire a company like Leader Skills if they don't have the funds. There's other things you can do, like just taking the disc, having a company just everybody takes it automatically, and it creates a self-awareness amongst everyone to look in the mirror, and it gets everyone on the same page. And there's lots of assessments out there. I genuinely fully think the disc is the best personally, but any tool like that is going to be helpful, and make it available to everybody at the company. Keep them all in a shared drive. So if you have to go have a conversation with someone. So if you are an introvert and you have to go have a tough conversation with an extrovert to sell them on your idea, you can pull down their disc, and it even tells you in there, like, here's how to talk to this person. And it tells you also what you can fall into that can turn off that person from listening. So it has a lot of really interesting things in it like that I would highly recommend. Um, but also, I would say if you are someone that needs to go into a meeting and you are speaking up is hard for you, then go find a cheerleader to be on your team before you go into that meeting. Find someone that you can talk through that idea first, that is an extrovert, that is going to be a little louder about speaking up for you too. Obviously, it's important that it's someone that you trust, because you don't want them to steamroll you and take your idea or run away with it in a way that you do not intend. And maybe it's a band of other people that are in your boat too, and you all don't speak up. But if you all talk about it together ahead of time, when you go into that meeting, it's going to be easier for you because you're not just standing alone out there on your own. And I really do think it's important to never forget you probably have more value to add to the conversation than everyone in the room talking, because most of us are talking, shooting from the hip, and we're just loud. And maybe what we're saying is smart and right, but maybe not. And just really remind yourself over and over, if you have to print it above your monitor, I think it's so important to remember that the value you add is huge. And if you let everybody in the room speak that's speaking, and the quiet ones sit there the whole time, you're doing a disservice to your company by not speaking up, because you're not throwing things out there that most people probably haven't thought about.
That's great advice, a great reminder. And then, I think I like that idea of getting early feedback or cheerleaders, people in that. And that's part of a broader theme of preparation, which really helps introverts. If you don't do your best thinking on the fly, work in advance. And that's helped a lot. That's something that's come up over and over in people in my own life, and also in people I've talked to. So that's great. You can see how having that self-awareness or more self-awareness can just facilitate those kinds of conversations and better understandings between people.
Absolutely.
As part of your training, and my understanding is you've worked a lot with middle managers, and maybe let's start with that shift between individual contributor and when there's someone's first getting into management. What is the kind of the biggest mindset shift you have to go through in order to make that change?
I think, there's lots of things that play into it, but I think first of all, again, like I said earlier, you're going from being a task person to now your job is to, drive strategic vision and get people on the bus and get contributions from the team on what's important and what's not. And that is that is just a 180 from being a task person to doing that. Taking time to make sure you're thinking of that, going into it is huge. And I think something else to consider too is the Peter principle, which you may be aware of, where people get promoted to the job they can't do. That doesn't mean when you get promoted to the job you can't do that you can't do it, but you have to acknowledge maybe that you don't have the skill set for it. So you need to
Hmm.
become a student of yourself, really. Understanding who you are, how you come across is way more important when you make that shift to leader than it's ever been before, because how you accomplish things, how you communicate with people is all going to be judged so differently than it was when you were just, sitting by them as a teammate.
Right. To give yourself grace to be a student and a chance to learn and a chance to fail also as you learn
Yes.
because that's a great teacher. But that you can do it. It's also a more optimistic take on the Peter principle than I've heard before. It's just
Yeah, that's
like
true.
yeah, you
It
can't
is a
do
little
it, but
optimistic.
there's hope.
Yeah. And there are some people that just can't do it, right?
Yeah,
But
right.
yeah, that's something to consider too.
Hmm.
Because there was a point where I almost got fired, which is how I ended up with Nan. And if I had never accepted I needed to learn more, I would have been done. I would have been washed out at that point. So that's leads to my optimism in it. And something else too, conflict and failure. I think again, this is a little bit from the disc. S's and C's, as I mentioned before, traditionally are introverts, not always, but S's and C's are very afraid of conflict or shy away from it. And failure, same thing, afraid to take steps that they could fail at because they want to think very carefully, make sure that they've thought through everything and that there's no chance they're wrong about anything. But you really have to lean into that a bit, to really grow and develop. If you never fail, then you're never going to grow. My list of what not to do again is very, very long. And my list of what to do again is actually pretty short because a lot of times what worked wasn't because I did it right. It was just a period of time where it worked. All the right pieces came together. So it may not be a recipe to use again. So if you're afraid of failure and you don't let yourself do that, there's a lot of things you won't learn. So it's important to remember that too, I think. And handling conflict, we spent a lot of time in leader skills talking about how to handle conflict and providing tools. And if you can really learn how to have a conversation and address conflict in a way that makes it almost unemotional, it's more of a process, it can make your life so much easier, much, much easier. And I think that's important too.
I think that's right. And there's another theme that, as I got more into leadership and certainly senior leadership, this theme of discomfort comes up more and more. And, I think it's probably is more uncomfortable for introverts in those situations, or there's more discomfort you'll encounter. But I've heard plenty of, and I'd love to hear your experience about this too, but I've heard it from people who are just like impossibly extroverted in my mind, like they're just, it's like that leadership is really uncomfortable for them at times. And the higher you are, the more uncomfortable it can get. I don't know, does that conjure anything for you?
Well, I think what's interesting is as you move up, you're going to be surrounded by more and more extroverts. So I think that in itself is going to make it more uncomfortable because, again, we're less aware of how we're coming across. Um, and and it's interesting, right? Because they're more extroverts, not because they're more equipped to do the job necessarily, but because they're the loudest people in the room. They are their own advocates in a way that an introvert never it will be. So that's how they end up in those roles. Um, and it's funny. I just think like if you are aware of that and understand your difference is good and the way you do it and accomplish it just because it's different and maybe the extroverts may look at you weird or think that may not see the value in how you do it, believe in what you're doing because again, I go back to Nan saying the very best CEO she's worked with were introverts. What they're doing right. They are more equipped because they care more, because they've thought through things more, they've listened more. They do things that an extrovert, much like myself, will not do because it doesn't come naturally to us. So it may get more uncomfortable, but honestly, the higher you go, the more value you have in that company because
Hmm.
you are doing things differently and you're pushing people that are probably doing things differently in a way that can make them better too.
That's right. And the other thing is, as you have more influence, you have more power to make things easier for everyone
Yes,
around you. And you know,
absolutely.
just one example is like as I've been a senior leader, I can set policies for meetings. I can arrange our offsite meeting to take breaks in a way that it's extrovert friendly. I can give people the tasks to prepare, and so they're not put on the spot. And that's not to say you don't have a lot of influence if you're even at an individual contributor level, because you have the ability to point these things out and educate people around you on that.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't think anyone listening should undervalue that. I know it's uncomfortable sometimes to speak up and ask for that, but you really have to be your own advocate. I mean, that's why the us outgoing people are promoted and doing well, because we are our own advocates. So if you can speak up and explain to other people in your organization, if we did this one little thing or change this or maybe, organize things a little differently, it could be good for the company because of X, Y, and Z. And again, don't assume we've already thought that through, because we certainly have probably not.
Right. And yeah, when you raise these things, bear that empathy in mind. Like
Mhm.
people are just not aware.
Yes. That's really should probably be the moral of
Mm.
the entire that should be the theme of this, is that we are very unaware. So,
Yeah.
and I think a lot's to be said for when you go into a conversation, and just lead with that more often. For example, I can get very like wound up, and people think I'm mad almost because I'm like,
Hmm.
oh my gosh, and I have a lot of emotion around what I do. So I've just gotten in the habit when I'm talking to anyone I work with, a partner, employees, anybody, and just saying, hey guys, I am really riled up about this. It's not you. I'm not mad. Just so you know, I'm just like, I'm really more excited than anything. So please keep that in mind as we talk through this. Whereas I think if you're an introvert and you kind of lead with that, hey guys, give me a few minutes here to get this out. I know I'm going to be a little slow delivering this, or I might be, there's a lot of details I want to get out. So if you can just give me 10 minutes, and keep in mind, I'm an introvert, please bear with me for this.
Hmm.
Leading with that sets the expectation in a way that it wouldn't work if you don't, if that makes sense, the way I said that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really, yeah, whenever possible, if you can set expectations, and yeah, and that's something I wrote a piece about. Let me speak. And that's one of the techniques is like, yeah, bear with me 5 minutes. Now, I've worked with people who don't have that 5 minutes. Like they've got 2 minutes max before they're going to go. But but you understand and that's having empathy for them. That's their capability. So you kind of prepare for the communications for the person you're talking to.
Yeah, yeah. Remember, sometimes it's a habit of ours to start thinking about what we want to say while you're talking, and you have to find different ways to draw us in to make sure we don't do that, or to reset us to get us back in there. And again, I think that's why it's really important that companies really try to focus on self-awareness and understanding each other and having empathy, because there's no right way to do anything. Not at all. I mean, I think companies that focus on the results, not the process, do very well, because how I accomplish something is wildly different than my husband, who is an introvert. I mean, the sheer way that we accomplish things in our household is you could probably do a case study on it, because my extrovert and his introvert way are so different, but we get to the same results. Just we don't understand why we both do it the way we do. And we both just accept it, and it is what it is.
So, and yeah, self awareness is so important, and it sounds like the disc profile helps a lot with that. Are there any other suggestions you'd have for developing that self awareness?
I think there's a lot of good books out there to read, first of all. I think that, you know, you always have to be a student with yourself as the subject matter throughout your career. And I think it's for, your personal life too. It's great. So I do think that we're all very different, and there's different books out there that are great for different people in different ways. But first of all, I just think, like the Harvard Business Review magazine, I love that. I still get the print copy, by the way, because I love to read the print copy. But every issue, there is something in there I feel like that is just oh my gosh, I hadn't thought about it that way, or it gets you thinking about things about yourself as well. That's just one example. You should see, I probably have 80 books sitting here on my bookshelves that I haven't read all of them, but I know of all of them enough to be able to give people like, hey, this one is about this. Maybe you should check this one out, because some of them don't speak to me personally, but they're great for other people in different ways. So I think that's important. And I also think, finding a mentor out there, resources, people that you can talk to that'll help you understand how people are perceiving you, or that'll
Mm.
give you that tough love conversation. I think that's very important too. Um, when you're looking for mentors, and I think everyone is guilty probably. I can't speak if you're an introvert how you would do this, but I imagine the person that is the most successful and everybody looks up to is the person most people want to be their mentor. But just because they are the leader and appear to be the most successful doesn't necessarily mean that they are the right person to be a mentor to help you grow. It doesn't mean that they're going to listen and see you in a way that they can really help make you be your best. I would look around at, who has a really successful team, or who do people really respect, that maybe isn't necessarily at the top leadership role, but who's getting it done, who's always producing results. There's a lot of things to consider and look at when you're looking for someone to help be a mentor, to give you that advice.
Yeah, that's really great advice. And who's maybe to add to that, like who makes you feel good when you're around them
Yeah,
and makes the
yeah,
other people feel good around them. They're probably more likely to see you and recognize you for who you are and see your potential. I think that's a really, especially for an introvert, it'd be because especially earlier on in your career, this was my experience. I was not presenting as a leader, like it's just this is a way to put it. And so, I think my potential was overlooked. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm interested in this. And then I eventually did find a mentor who was, really believed in me and supported me in that.
yeah, it makes a big difference.
Hmm.
And to be a good mentor or leader, you really have to listen. And let me just tell you, if you go after someone like me in my young years, I was not the right person to be a mentor, because I would have told you all about me, like what works for me, how I do it. And that's just all the wrong things to do, which is probably why I enjoy what I do now so much, because it's really opened my eyes and given me empathy and curiosity. I think curiosity is very big. I think a lot of us take things personally when we shouldn't, because we just don't realize they may not have even considered us in the equation. Like, it's not about me. We all want to think it's about us, but the reality is there's so many of us in a room. It's important to realize that what you're taking or assuming as a thing is not even a thing, or
Hmm.
it didn't even matter and they didn't mean it personally to you.
Yeah, these are hard earned lessons, and it's really, I mean, I've found it a real pleasure as a mentor to give back and and to help people, avoid some of the pain. Obviously, you can't prevent. Everyone's going to have their own
Yeah,
challenges, but yeah, to be able to give back in that way is very rewarding.
absolutely.
So there's other sort of subject of change, and so we're always in the process of development, and there are certain things like, let's say you have a mentor and they're holding up that mirror to you and you're like, oh, I'm really doing these things and I don't know how to change, or I know what I should be doing, but I'm struggling with it. I guess how do you think about change? How do you help people approach some of these difficult changes?
I think first of all, it goes back to being a student yourself. I think that we all have DNA. Um, One way that we describe it with the disc is like the way that you solve problems around you is, it's kind of like the software running in the background. And you can't rewrite the software, but you can create some cheat codes if you put it into habit, to really kind of stop yourself when you get back into habits. There's usually red flags. So um, if I, for example, if I get mad or I start feeling too much emotion, that to me is a red flag. I've just trained myself that, boom, Holly, you need to stop. And why are you feeling this emotion? What's really causing it? And I'm still working on it. I mean,
Hmm.
I think Nan and I started working together probably 12 to 15 years ago. And I still have to remind myself of those things. And it's it's so that I help others better. It's not necessarily for my own benefit and how I accomplish things. It's to make me a better leader of the people around me that I do that. So, what I would say is, first of all, accept that you can't change who you are. You just are who you are, but you have to then really think hard about how you're being perceived and how you need to really be aware of things that you can do that maybe other people misinterpret. For example, my father and I are identical, except he's an introvert. People think I'm bubbly and happy, and people think he's stuck up. And it's like, why is that? It's really strange, because we both have almost everything else about us is the same. And it's just how people interpret him in the room, quietly sitting there. Um, but once you get to know him, he's just as funny and bubbly as I can be. When he goes to recharge, he goes to be alone. When I go to recharge, I want to be around a group of people.
Hmm.
So that's about the main difference there. So I think knowing those things and then putting things in place to make sure you're a student to it on a regular basis, even if you have to schedule time initially, put it on your Outlook calendar, to really think about, what do I need to be more aware of? What can I be better at? And maybe it's something as simple as, I'm going to speak up in my meetings and say at least one thing, take a baby step, whatever it is. And you write it down and you make it a goal and you put it on your calendar. So every week you're looking back at what you said you're going to do, so that you're continually trying to make those things more of a habit, to help override your software.
That's right. And it's really grounded in self-acceptance, self-awareness and self-acceptance. Like not only, oh, I do this, but this is me, that's great. I know that I'm happy and bubbly when I'm, with a group of friends that I'm comfortable with, and then I'm not showing that when I'm in a big group of people that I haven't met before. So yeah, bringing that level of acceptance, and then so. Oh, and that said, I would, there are things I want to do in the world. Like other things I want to accomplish, and it's for like in your example, I want to do this for my team. So I'm going to take these steps and maybe make myself uncomfortable in the process. But it
Yeah.
sounds like that's the that's the process of change.
Yeah. Yeah. That is very true. And it can be uncomfortable, but I also think the more you do it, that it does get a little easier. I know that it's never going to be completely easy. It's always going to be forced, but there are things we can kind of train ourselves. And if you bite the bullet a few times,
Hmm.
it makes it a little easier to force yourself to do it down the road. I mean, like, think about a networking event. I actually have some people, friends, that I've gone with them because they're introverts. I don't even know what the heck these people do for a living, but I'm the one that went into the networking event with them to get people talking and make it comfortable. My husband joked that I should just start that as a business, to be your networking buddy.
It's a really great business idea.
and,
There's a
and I
market
love to do
need.
it because I love. But yeah, it's interesting how you just kind of have to do baby steps for yourself and forcing yourself to do those things.
One other thing I wanted to ask about is support systems. So you mentioned mentorship. What other things can aspiring leaders do to gain support?
Introverts can make great leaders because they listen, right? So you probably already have people around you at work that very much respect you without you even really thinking about it. A leader that is an introvert is probably doing things very quietly, talking to people, getting things done behind the scenes. They're not like William Pullman in Independence Day giving the speech on top of the military equipment, getting everybody excited to go kill the aliens,
Hmm.
which is what a lot of us think a good leader is. But the reality is that speech is only good until the adrenaline wears off, right? And then you go back to being an overly pushy, aggressive boss, which is what I was, versus the introvert who is kind of the silent assassin in the background. They're doing things, they're respecting people, they're listening. And by the way, I'm saying this it sounds very extreme. There's no right or wrong in the disc, and there's no right or wrong in people and how they do things. It's about being self-aware and empathy for others. So I don't want to make it sound like there's a right or a wrong in anyone's personality or how they do things. But I do genuinely think that you probably don't realize it as an introvert, but there's a lot of people that already quietly respect you without it even being said. So first of all, looking around you and seeing those things and developing those relationships, you may already have a team you don't know you have, of
Hmm.
people that support you. So cultivating those relationships too, and someone you're really comfortable with and work with on a regular basis, just having a candid conversation with them too about, hey, I'm uncomfortable in these situations. Do you have any suggestions on how I can do better? And having those conversations, I think actually will help you a lot have more of a team and more cheerleaders. And as you get used to having those conversations, you'll probably end up finding more mentors and getting more feedback to help make you better as well.
Yeah, that's a really good suggestion. I like to think of it as a certain stage in my career it was like I have friends everywhere, and it's like it sounds slightly mercenary, but it's in a way it's like you're building capital. Like it's your, but you do that by truly caring and trying, truly being a support to other people, and then they're your support, and that becomes an influence network. You can get incredible amounts of things done when you have people supporting you throughout your company.
Absolutely. And when people know you're the one getting things done in the background and you're the one that's always respectful, the traits about that, surrounding an introvert, I mean, there's so many good traits. And I think just because you aren't the loudest one in the room, you have no idea how much you are actually valued in a lot of ways. But because you're not your own loud advocate, you know, you have to develop those relationships to make sure everybody does see you and know you. Because if you don't, what happens? You end up with all of us extroverts in leadership roles. So you do have to, if it's hard for you to think about it on your own as an introvert, don't do it for yourself. Do it for the betterment of your company and the
Hmm.
betterment of your team.
Yeah, a lot of times it's easier for me to think about it that way, is that I'm trying to help other people because, yeah, and I think part of it is like there it doesn't feel authentic to just be doing it for yourself. That's part of the psychology, I think, of why you don't want to be grabbing attention for yourself, and you're kind of shying away. But when you do it for other people, then that's motivating, and it does feel authentic.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's absolutely.
Awesome. This has been a lot of fun. There's a lot of topics we could cover. Um, yeah, I just love your, just the refrain about just look, really we don't know, and I'm part of me is
Yeah,
thinking, no, no, we get it, we know you're not aware, but the part we forget is that is the empathy and the care is like that you really you people are well meaning. We're all coming from the place we're coming from, and give that other person the benefit of the doubt.
absolutely. And something else I think I could offer, I would say, is ask yourself questions. Coaches pretty much get paid to schedule time with people to ask them questions they could already ask themselves, right? They just don't
Hmm.
have time to do it. Or to sit down with someone for 50 minutes and say, here's my problem. And then all we do is ask you a lot of questions to get you thinking. Really, you come up with the answers. So, really being curious about if there's something you are afraid to do, or like going into a meeting, saying, okay, what's my biggest fear? And drilling down on those things will really help you understand more about what your trigger points are and things that are really scaring you. And maybe when you get to the bottom, it's something simple that you can just let go of, or something you can work around. For me, when I first left corporate America to go to school to be the coach and to get involved with all of that, it was terrifying for me. And I finally one day woke up and I'm like, okay, what's the worst that could happen? And literally, I live by that question now. What is the worst that could happen? Why am I afraid? Or, what is bothering me? And then just starting to write down, and every answer I put, I ask more questions about it. So if you try to face things that way too, I think it can help you kind of get to the root problems to kind of overcome what those issues are, or to at least just be aware of it so that you can force yourself to take action against it.
That's good advice, yeah, and that's something you can do on your own or with the help of somebody else.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Awesome. Is there anything else that just you think that the audience should know about either leadership training or maybe even your work?
Well, I do think that leader skills is something everybody should do. 99.9% of our people who have gone through the courses have said it's something they'll use for the rest of their life, personally and professionally. We have a money back guarantee. No one's taken us up on that. I think that speaks volumes about the program itself. But what I would just love to share in general with your listeners is speak up. Like, if there's anything I could ever say that I think you need to hear, is please speak up, because people like me need to hear it.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Thanks, Holly G, for being on the podcast. It was great talking with you.
Thank you very much. It was great to be here.